Picture the most powerful man in Judea.
Okay.
He is sitting on an elevated throne, surrounded by armed Roman legions, holding the absolute legal authority of life and death over the entire region.
Right. He holds all the cards.
He holds all the cards, but he is terrified. He is sweating, he's frustrated, and he is completely unnerved by a prisoner standing at the bottom of the steps.
It is a wild visual.
It really is. And the kicker here is that the prisoner refuses to speak a single word.
Not one word.
Welcome to Reform Thinking. I am so thrilled to have you joining us for this deep dive into the historical and theological records of, well, really one of the most solemn courtrooms in human history.
Yeah, without a doubt.
We are looking directly at the trial of Jesus Christ before Pontius Pilate. Specifically, we're going to unpack the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 11 through 14.
Such a heavy passage.
It is. And for those of you listening, our sources for today's analysis are two really extensive, rigorous expositions on the text. The first is called The Silent King Before Pilate, and the second is The Sovereign Silence of the True King.
Both are incredibly thorough.
Very thorough. And we have a very clear mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack a staggering contrast, which is this tension between human self-vindication and divine submission.
That is the core issue here.
Because think about it. When you are falsely accused, your human instinct demands that you fight back. You want to clear your name.
Oh, immediately. You want to set the record straight.
Yeah, you want to defend yourself, yet the eternal Son of God remains entirely silent. So we are asking one overarching question today. What kind of sovereign stands bound before a corrupt governor and says absolutely nothing to defend himself?
It's a question that really forces you to reevaluate everything you know about authority.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. To understand the sheer magnitude of Christ's silence, we first need to look at the explosive historical context of first-century Judea. We really have to set the stage for you.
The setting is just critical. You can't skip this part. We are in Jerusalem, and it is the festival of Passover.
Which is a huge deal.
Massive. This is not some quiet, reflective, family holiday. This is a massive, highly volatile gathering.
Let's give you a modern analogy to help visualize this. Think of Jerusalem during Passover, like a city hosting the Olympics. But the city is actively trying to overthrow its own government.
That is a great way to picture it.
And there's an occupying foreign army acting as the referees. The population swells by hundreds of thousands of pilgrims.
They are packing into the streets.
Just shoulder to shoulder. And they're all gathered to celebrate their ancient liberation from foreign bondage in Egypt. But while they are singing songs about freedom from tyranny, they are living under the heavy boot of Roman occupation.
Yeah, the irony is thick.
It's a highly flammable situation. And sitting right on top of this pressure cooker is Pontius Pilate.
Pontius Pilate. He was the Roman prefect under the rule of Tiberius Caesar.
Right.
He governed from AD 26 to 36. And as the prefect, he represented the total unyielding authority of the Roman Empire in a province that was, frankly, notorious for insurrection and zealotry.
And Pilate was not, he wasn't known for his diplomatic touch. Right?
Oh, not at all. He was brutal.
The historical records outside the Bible show us a man who repeatedly antagonized the Jewish population.
Yeah.
I mean, he just poked the bear over and over.
He really did.
Like early in his administration, he marched his troops into Jerusalem at night, carrying military standards that had the image of the emperor on them.
Which was a huge provocation.
A massive violation of Jewish law regarding graven images. When the Jewish people marched to his residence in Caesarea to protest, they literally bared their necks to his soldiers.
They were offering to be slaughtered rather than accept those blasphemous images.
Yeah, and Pilate actually had to back down from that.
He blinked.
He blinked. But then later, he took money from the sacred temple treasury to build an aqueduct.
Just blatantly stealing temple funds.
Exactly. I mean, yes, taking holy money for a public works project.
Yeah.
And when the crowds protested that, he didn't back down. He sent soldiers in plain clothes into the mob with clubs, and a massive slaughter ensued.
So he is a ruthless, violent governor who is already on really thin ice with both the local population and his superiors back in Rome.
He's desperate to keep the peace, but he only knows how to use force.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the calculated legal maneuver the Jewish religious authorities, the Sanhedrin, use when they bring Jesus into this specific tense environment.
Walk us through that maneuver.
Well, the Sanhedrin had just held a nocturnal, illicit trial.
Middle of the night, totally illegal.
Yeah, completely against their own protocols. And they condemned Jesus on a religious charge of blasphemy because he claimed to be the Son of God.
But they hit a wall.
They did because they could not carry out the execution themselves.
Because Rome had stripped them of that authority.
Yes. The legal term is the exeglatiae, the right of the sword.
The right of the sword.
Rome allowed conquered nations to manage their own minor civil disputes and religious affairs, just to keep the bureaucracy down. But they reserved the right of capital punishment solely for the Roman governor.
It was a mechanism of subjugation.
Precisely. Taking away the edicts gladiae meant taking away ultimate sovereignty. If the Sanhedrin wanted Jesus dead, they had to drag him before the civil bench of Pilate.
But Pilate does not care about Jewish theological disputes.
Not one bit.
He is not going to execute a man just for claiming to be the son of the God of Israel.
He would probably just laugh at them.
Right. Which means the religious leaders have to completely change their story the moment they cross the threshold into Pilate's jurisdiction. They translate a religious charge into a civil charge.
They translate it into high treason.
Treason against Rome.
Yeah. In Roman law, this is called crimen laesae majestatis.
Wow, okay.
It refers to any crime that diminishes the majesty or authority of the Roman people or the emperor.
So they pitch him as a political threat.
The religious leaders look Pilate right in the eye and claim that Jesus is a political insurgent. They say he is forbidding the payment of taxes to Caesar and setting himself up as a rival king.
The hypocrisy that is just staggering to me.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, you think about it. The Jewish leaders disguised Roman occupation. They absolutely hated paying taxes to Caesar.
They would have loved an actual insurrectionist.
Yes. They prayed daily for a Messiah to come and crush the pagan empire. Yet, when their actual Messiah arrives, they weaponize that very same pagan empire to murder him.
It's a stunning betrayal.
They use the Roman state machinery to eliminate their theological problem.
We also need to view this through a theological lens, though. Both of our sources heavily reference the Westminster Confession of Faith,
Which is a brilliant framework for this.
specifically the chapter that deals with the doctrine of providence. The confession articulates that God ordains whatsoever comes to pass, yet he does so without being the author of sin.
Hold on. Let me push back on that for a second, because that is a massive claim to drop on the listener.
I know, it's a heavy concept.
If God ordained this entire trial from eternity past, how can you possibly say the Sanhedrin or Pilate are legally guilty? Doesn't that make God the author of the trap?
That is the natural human objection.
Right, because if it is a divine script, aren't they just actors forced to play their part?
It sounds like that, but it misunderstands how providence operates. God is the primary cause of all things, yes. But he works through the free, uncoerced secondary causes of his creatures.
Secondary causes.
Yes.
Meaning their own wills.
Yes. The political machinations of Pilate, the intense religious hatred of the Sanhedrin, the cynical changing of the charges, all of these human actors are making real, culpable choices.
According to what they actually want to do.
Exactly. They're acting according to their own wicked desires. God did not force the Pharisees to hate Jesus. Their hatred flowed freely from their own fallen nature.
So they are fully responsible for their wickedness.
100% responsible.
Yet all of this is perfectly directed by divine decree.
Yes. God's providence is entirely sovereign over the situation. He takes the absolute worst of human malice and utilizes it to bring the Passover lamb to the exact required place of slaughter.
That is so hard for our modern minds to grasp.
The cross is not a tragic accident where things slipped out of God's control. It is the climax of divine planning, executed through the free, sinful actions of men.
That dynamic is just awe-inspiring. Human wickedness is on full display, 100% guilty. Divine providence is simultaneously on full display, 100% in control.
It's a perfect storm.
So we have the historical trap set. The religious leaders have framed Jesus for treason, and he's standing before a ruthless governor. Let's shift our focus to how the gospel writer Matthew frames this specific moment structurally.
Because Matthew is doing something really brilliant here.
We are moving from the history of the event to the literary architecture of the text itself.
Right. Matthew does not just write down a chronological list of facts. He isn't a court stenographer.
He has a theological agenda.
He arranges his narrative very deliberately to highlight specific theological truths. The sources refer to the literary structure surrounding this trial as a sandwich of guilt.
A sandwich of guilt. I love that phrasing.
Matthew places the Roman trial of Jesus directly between two glaring, undeniable examples of human guilt.
Let's break those two examples down for you listening. Because if you miss this, you miss Matthew's point.
You really do.
Immediately before we get to Jesus standing in front of Pilate, Matthew records the scene with Judas Iscariot.
It's a betrayer.
Judas realizes that Jesus has been condemned, and he is seized with worldly remorse. He goes back to the chief priests and elders, throws the betrayal money into the temple, and says, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood."
He explicitly confesses the innocence of the man he just sold.
The man who spent 3 years with Jesus knows he is innocent.
And notice the reaction of the religious leaders. They say, "What is that to us? See to it yourself."
Total apathy.
They do not care about innocence or guilt. They only care about their objective. So Judas goes and hangs himself. You have the betrayer himself acting as a witness to the innocence of the accused.
Then on the other side of the sandwich, immediately following the trial before Pilate, Matthew gives us the scene with the crowd.
The Barabbas scene.
Pilate tries to find a loophole to release Jesus, so he offers the crowd a choice. Release Jesus or release Barabbas. And who is Barabbas?
He is a known insurrectionist and a murderer.
He is guilty of the exact political crimes that the religious leaders are falsely pinning on Jesus.
It's wild. Barabbas represents the violent zealot revolution that the Jewish leaders actually wanted.
He's their kind of guy.
He is the absolute antithesis of Jesus. And the crowd chooses to release the murderer and execute the innocent man.
So synthesizing this for you listening, Matthew is constructing an airtight case for the complete innocence of Jesus.
Watertight.
This trial is a public miscarriage of justice of the highest order. But the literary flow reveals something much greater than just a tragic mistake in the legal system.
It points to something theological.
It reveals a substitutionary theme. The innocent one stands precisely in the spot where the guilty should stand.
Barabbas goes free while the sinless king is bound.
Judas is guilty, yet the innocent blood he betrayed is what will secure redemption.
This specific moment is the culmination of a theme Matthew has been building from the very first page of his gospel.
The theme of kingship.
Yes, Matthew traces a royal trajectory. Chapter 1 begins with the genealogy.
All those hard-to-pronounce names.
Right, but those names matter. They legally establish Jesus as the son of David, the rightful heir to the throne.
He includes kings in the lineage.
He does, and he structures it around the exile to show that the monarchy is finally being restored.
And then in chapter 2,
the Gentile magi arrive in Jerusalem asking, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?"
So the theme is there from day one.
This royal identity continues through his ministry, particularly in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus speaks with supreme, unparalleled legislative authority.
He says, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." That's royal authority.
Absolutely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. By the time we reach chapter 27, Matthew is forcing the listener to recognize a horrifying reality. This trial is not just a localized legal dispute. This is the official national rejection of the king by the Old Covenant people.
They have seen his miraculous credentials.
They saw the blind see and the lame walk.
They have heard his authoritative teaching, and their response is to hand him over to a pagan ruler to be slaughtered.
If you isolate these verses, you might be tempted to turn this into a basic moral lesson.
People do that all the time.
You might read it and think, wow, Jesus stayed really calm under pressure. I should try to be less defensive at work when my boss criticizes me.
They reduce massive, earth-shattering redemptive events to simple life hacks for emotional regulation.
It's such a shallow reading.
It is. Matthew's goal is vastly bigger. This text is about the king securing his kingdom through suffering. It is about the fulfillment of a royal mission.
Let's zoom into the first specific movement of the text, the interrogation itself. We are in verse 11. Jesus stands before the governor. Pilate looks at him and asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
To fully grasp the weight of Pilate's question, we need to look at the Greek nuance.
Because English misses some of the flavor here.
It really does. Pilate's phrase begins with the emphatic personal pronoun "su." Pilate places it at the very beginning of the sentence to convey deep sarcasm and incredulity.
He is basically scoffing at him.
Yeah, he's mocking him. Pilate is looking at a man who has been arrested in the middle of the night. Jesus is bound. He is likely bruised from being struck by the high priest's guards.
He looks like a peasant.
He has been completely abandoned by his followers, and he has been handed over by his own nation's leadership. Pilate, whose only category for royalty involves legions, wealth, and armor, is essentially asking, "Are you, this bound, helpless, pathetic peasant, the king of this troublesome nation?"
It's dripping with disdain. And Jesus answers with a very specific, brief phrase, "You have said so." In the original Greek, that is syllogize.
Syllogize.
What does that actually mean mechanically in this context? Because to a modern English speaker, it sounds evasive and almost sounds like a politician dodging a question.
Like, hey, those are your words, not mine.
Yeah, it sounds
No.
like he's deflecting.
It is not evasive at all. It is a well-known Jewish idiom of qualified affirmation.
Qualified affirmation.
By saying syllogize, Jesus is saying, yes, I am the king, but not in the political, militaristic sense that you imagine.
Oh.
Jesus is affirming his royal identity while completely rejecting the pagan and political assumptions attached to Pilate's definition of the title.
He is redefining kingship in real time.
Precisely. Jesus refuses to accept the false definition of a violent zealot revolution.
Which is what Barabbas was.
Right. Pilate's only framework for a king is someone who uses swords, raises armies, and forms political alliances to seize territory.
If Jesus were that kind of king, he would be a direct threat to Rome.
But Jesus is establishing that his authority is transcendent.
I want to bring this directly to you, the listener. Think about the kind of king Jesus actually is. He refuses to be manufactured by earthly force.
He won't be put in a box.
He refuses to be sustained by a military revolt or a political campaign. In our modern society, people frequently try to co-opt Jesus for their own political agendas.
Oh, constantly, on all sides.
You see individuals across the entire political spectrum trying to make Jesus the mascot for their specific social movement. They want a king who will fight their earthly battles using earthly legislative or cultural methods.
They want a Barabbas, frankly.
Yes, but Christ's response to Pilate shatters that entire paradigm.
His kingdom is not advanced by the sword of insurrection.
Nor by modern political maneuvering.
It is a true spiritual reign that operates on entirely different principles than the empires of men.
So Jesus answers Pilate's direct question about his identity. But once he makes that qualified affirmation, the religious leaders unleash absolute chaos in the courtroom.
They just lose their minds.
The chief priests and elders start throwing every accusation they can invent at him. This brings us to verses 12 and 13. How does the king respond to the slander?
With a deafening silence.
The text tells us that while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, Jesus answered nothing.
The Greek phrase is auden apekernato.
In any normal courtroom, remaining completely silent while people list your supposed crimes looks like an admission of guilt.
It looks terrible for the defense.
If you are innocent, your survival instinct kicks in. You speak up, you defend yourself, you point out the obvious flaws in the prosecution's case. Why does he stay silent?
This raises an important question, and the answer takes us to the absolute bedrock of Reformed theology.
Okay, lay it on us.
To understand the mechanism of this silence, we have to look at the core doctrine of substitution. Specifically, we need to examine the framework of active and passive obedience.
Active and passive obedience.
Yes, which is detailed in Chapter 8 of the Westminster Confession.
Wait, active versus passive obedience? I always thought obedience was just doing what you're told. What is the distinction here, and why does it matter for understanding his silence?
It is a vital distinction for any believer to grasp. Active obedience refers to Christ living a perfectly sinless life.
Okay, so his daily life.
Fulfilling every positive requirement of God's moral law on behalf of his people. He loved God perfectly and loved his neighbor perfectly. He did what we failed to do.
He kept the rules.
Yes. Now, passive obedience refers to his willing submission to the penalty of the law. He suffered the wrath and punishment that we deserved.
Let me make sure I am tracking with you. So passive obedience does not mean he was weak or just a helpless victim having things done to him.
Not at all.
It means he was actively submitting to the penalty.
That is correct. The term passive comes from the Latin passio, meaning suffering.
Like the Passion of the Christ.
Yes, that's where the word comes from. It is about his enduring the penalty.
So how does his silence in front of Pilate fit into this framework? Because if Jesus had spoken up, he could have won the trial.
Handily.
He possesses perfect omniscience and perfect eloquence. He could have exposed the hypocrisy of the Sanhedrin, laid bare their political motives to Pilate, and walked out of that courtroom a free man.
He absolutely could have dismantled their case in seconds. Pilate would have been forced to acquit him.
Wow. Let's just stop there for a second. If Jesus wins an acquittal, his people are condemned.
That is the crucial realization. That is why this matters so much.
He keeps his mouth shut, Because he is voluntarily assuming the legal guilt of his elect.
He is acting as their substitute.
His silence, his active submission to the penalty, it is his signature on his own death warrant. He is fulfilling the covenant of redemption.
Covenant of redemption. Yeah.
Also known as the Pactum Salutis. Can we expand on that? What are the mechanics of this covenant?
The covenant of redemption is the agreement made in eternity past between the persons of the Trinity.
Before the world even existed.
Right. The Father appointed the Son to be the mediator. The Son voluntarily agreed to take on human flesh and bear the penalty for the elect, and the Spirit agreed to apply that redemption.
It is almost like a modern legal trust or a corporate assumption of liability.
That's a good way to frame it.
The Son legally agrees to take the debt of a specific group of people onto his own ledger. So, Jesus standing there in silence in Pilate's court is not a man giving up.
He is not defeated.
It is him carrying out a legally binding promise made before time began. He is absorbing the liability.
And our sources draw a vivid, breathtaking contrast here between the first Adam and the second Adam.
The Adam of Genesis and Jesus as the new Adam. Walk us through how those two moments in history parallel and reverse each other.
Think back to the Garden of Eden. God made a covenant of works with the first Adam.
Do this and live, don't do this and die.
Right. And Adam represented all of humanity. When Adam sinned and broke that covenant, what was his immediate instinctual reaction when God confronted him?
Well, first he hid.
Yes.
And then he opened his mouth. He immediately engaged in blame shifting.
He started pointing fingers.
He blamed the woman, and he even indirectly blamed God. He said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me food." The guilty man spoke up to preserve himself.
He used his words to feign innocence and deflect guilt.
It's such a human reaction.
Now look at the second Adam, Jesus Christ. He is completely sinless. He has fulfilled the covenant of works perfectly. He has broken no law.
He has nothing to hide.
Yet he stands before a corrupt human judge, surrounded by lies, and he keeps his mouth closed. He refuses to defend himself.
It's the total opposite of Eden.
He accepts a condemnation he did not earn to save the very people who act exactly like the first Adam.
That completely flips our entire human legal system on its head. The guilty man speaks to hide his guilt, but the innocent man stays silent to bear guilt that isn't his.
It is a staggering reality.
And that profound silence creates an unexpected, visceral reaction in the most ruthless man in the room.
It shakes Pilate to his core.
This brings us to verse 14. Pilate presses him. Pilate says, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?"
Pilate is practically begging Jesus to give him something, some kind of defense to work with.
"Just give me a crumb so I can let you go."
Right, but Jesus does not answer a single word. And Matthew tells us that as a result, the governor marveled exceedingly.
The Greek there is hosthomasin. Salian. Why is Pilate so shaken by this? I mean, he's seen a lot of things.
To understand Pilate's psychological state, we have to understand Greco-Roman legal proceedings.
The actual court mechanics.
Yes. The Roman legal system in provincial areas often operated under a procedure called cognitio extra ordinem.
What are the mechanics of that kind of trial?
It was an extraordinary trial procedure where the magistrate had wide latitude to hear evidence and pass judgment without a jury.
Pilate was judge, jury, and executioner.
Literally. But a key mechanical element in Roman law was how a defendant's silence was interpreted by the court.
How was it interpreted?
A persistent refusal to answer direct accusations was considered a contumacia.
Contumacia,
Yeah.
which translates to criminal stubbornness.
Yes, but it was more than just being stubborn. It was an insult to the majesty of the Roman court.
Oh, so it was contempt of court.
Basically, yes. It was legally interpreted as a forfeiture of your defense and an immediate confession of guilt.
If you don't speak, you agree with the charges.
If you refused to defend yourself, the Romans assumed you were guilty and just defying their authority. Pilate was used to dealing with contumacia from hardened zealots who hated Rome.
Guys like Barabbas who would just spit at him.
But Pilate does not see guilt or political defiance in Jesus.
He sees something completely alien to his experience.
Pilate was a man accustomed to the desperate pleas of condemned men. He was used to prisoners weeping, bartering for their lives, trying to bribe him, or shouting their innocence until their voices gave out.
People begging for mercy.
He held the power of life and death, and people groveled before him. But Jesus is absolutely still. He displays an unnerving, transcendent authority that requires no words.
The visual irony of this scene is incredible. I mean, picture it in your mind. Pilate is sitting up high in the elevated Roman tribunal, the Bemima seat.
Looking down on everyone.
He is flanked by heavily armed Roman legionaries. He holds the official power of the greatest empire on earth.
Yet he is the one sweating.
He is paralyzed, frustrated, and totally manipulated by the crowd and the religious leaders. While Jesus is physically bound at the bottom of the steps, he looks utterly powerless.
But he's not.
Yet, he is the only person in the entire scene possessing absolute freedom. He is completely in control of himself, in control of the timeline, and in control of the outcome.
The secular state, with all its military might and legal framework, is utterly confounded by the unyielding majesty of the Son of God.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the grave danger of mere amazement.
This is such an important warning for us today.
Pilate is amazed. He marvels exceedingly. He recognizes there is something uniquely majestic and innocent about Jesus. But what does he do with that amazement?
He still caves to the mob.
He washes his hands and sends them to the cross.
This is a terrifying warning for the listener. You can read the historical accounts of the Gospels and admire Jesus' ethics. You can marvel at his serenity under extreme pressure.
You can respect his moral courage in the face of corrupt authorities.
And you can still remain entirely unconverted and under the wrath of God.
Because wonder must yield to submission. Pilate wondered, but he did not submit.
He chose his own comfort.
He preserved his political career and his earthly comfort rather than bowing to the king. I think a lot of people today treat Jesus the same way Pilate did.
They absolutely do.
They think he is a fascinating historical figure. They might even quote his teachings on love or charity, but they do not submit to his absolute authority as Lord.
They keep him at arm's length as an object of historical curiosity.
Admiration without repentance leaves the soul under judgment.
Pilate's marveling did not save him. It only made his condemnation greater because he recognized the innocence of the man he executed.
He knew better, and he still did it.
Yeah.
So, we have looked at the explosive historical framing, the literary structure Matthew built, the interrogation, the mechanics of substitutionary silence, and the panicked reaction of secular authority.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Now we need to view this through an even wider lens. To fully grasp the weight of this scene, we must see how it acts as the focal point of the entire Old Testament.
The sources call this the whole Bible in one courtroom.
That gives me chills. The whole Bible in one courtroom.
The Christological fulfillment happening in these 4 short verses is comprehensive. We can look at a 4-fold fulfillment of Old Testament promises converging right here in Pilate's presence.
Let's walk through those fulfillments together for you listening. First, we have the fulfillment of the king.
The promised king.
This connects back to the grand Davidic promises of a ruler whose throne would last forever. But it also specifically fulfills the prophetic vision of Psalm 2.
Psalm 2 is a crucial text here. It speaks prophetically of the nations raging and the rulers of the earth taking counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed king.
And here in Matthew 27,
we have the Jewish religious leadership and the pagan Roman governor literally colluding to execute the anointed king.
The rebellion predicted centuries earlier in the Psalms is playing out in real time.
The rulers are trying to cast off the cords of God's authority.
Second, we have the fulfillment of the servant.
This is a direct, unmistakable fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 53.
The suffering servant.
Isaiah prophesied that the suffering servant would be oppressed and afflicted, yet he would not open his mouth. The prophet wrote, "Like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth."
And as the sources point out, this silence is not just a personality trait.
No, it's not a temperament issue.
It is not that Jesus was naturally quiet or introverted and just shut down under stress. It is a prophetic necessity.
He had to be silent to fulfill the exact specifications of the scriptures.
If he had mounted a defense, Isaiah 53 would be a false prophecy.
The whole plan would unravel. Third, we see the fulfillment of the priest and the sacrifice.
This goes back to the historical timing we discussed earlier. The trial is occurring at Passover.
Right, the timing is no accident.
In the book of Exodus, God commanded that the Passover lamb had to be inspected for defects before it could be sacrificed.
It had to be unblemished.
And here is the true Lamb of God being examined in the highest court of the land.
He is inspected by Pilate, and no blemish is found.
Pilate repeatedly tries to find a fault, repeatedly states he finds no guilt in him, and fails to justify the execution legally.
Jesus is completely innocent. He is acting as both the high priest who is offering the sacrifice and the perfect, spotless sacrifice itself.
Finally, the fourth fulfillment, the prophet.
A prophet's primary role is to speak the word of God.
Right.
But sometimes a prophet's physical actions are the message itself. Jesus' silence is an enacted prophetic word.
His refusal to speak declares louder than any sermon that redemption will be accomplished by blood on a cross, not by a slick verbal victory in a courtroom.
He will not talk his way out of the mission.
He enacts the prophecy by closing his mouth.
This fourfold fulfillment provides a massive theological guardrail for how we read the Gospels.
It keeps us from going off the rails.
It completely shatters any liberal theological reduction of Jesus. You cannot look at this convergence of prophecy and conclude that Jesus was just a tragic martyr who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Or that he's just crushed by the gears of the Roman justice system.
Right. Or the idea that he is just a moral example.
Yeah, some people read this and say, look at how Jesus handled criticism gracefully. We should learn to be silent when people are mean to us.
That completely misses the point.
It turns the gospel into a self-help seminar.
No Christian can replicate this atoning silence. We cannot act as a substitute for the sins of the world.
His silence is entirely unique to his mediatorial role.
We are called to imitate his character, yes, but we cannot imitate his atonement.
Having established this massive historical and theological reality, the question is, how does this shape the way you, the listener, live today?
Because it has to land somewhere.
We have to move into the application for the modern believer. We've talked about substitution. We've talked about Rome. But what does this mean for a Christian walking into work on a Monday morning?
Well, the sources use this text to offer a very sharp critique of worldly pragmatism, especially within the church.
What do you mean by worldly pragmatism in this context?
Pragmatism is the reliance on human methods and measurable results over biblical faithfulness.
Whatever gets the job done.
Yes, that mentality. The text critiques modern church movements that rely heavily on corporate marketing, on forming political alliances to gain cultural influence, on seeker-sensitive strategies that water down the gospel, or on reducing the Christian message to mere social activism.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
Don't we have to use the tools available to us? If the church wants to survive in a hostile culture, shouldn't we use public relations and political leverage to protect ourselves?
That is the human instinct. But look at Christ before Pilate. He uses none of those tools.
He had legions of angels at his disposal.
He had access to every human and divine lever of power, and he refused to pull them. He did not use public relations to manage his image with the crowds. He did not use stagecraft or political leverage with Pilate to survive.
He relied entirely on the sovereign decree of God the Father.
When the church adopts the world's pragmatic methods, it acts as though Christ's sovereign silent submission wasn't enough. It implies that we need to save ourselves using the very weapons the world uses.
We think we need to outmarket the world or outlegislate the world when our King conquered the world through suffering, submission, and death.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
And the sources also point out that this touches on how we view salvation itself, refuting specific theological errors.
Yes. The sources stress that this narrative demolishes synergism, specifically Arminian theology.
Let's define those terms clearly so everyone listening is on the same page.
Synergism is the idea that God and man cooperate to achieve salvation.
A joint effort.
Right. Arminianism, generally speaking, suggests that God provides the possibility of salvation through the cross, but the deciding factor is human free will. God makes it possible, but you make it actual.
But this text shows that the cross was not an accident, and it was not just a possibility.
It was not a tragic scenario where God was hoping things would work out if humans made the right choices.
It was a sovereignly ordained, definite substitution.
The trial, the accusations, the specific silence, the resulting condemnation, it was all decreed to effectively completely secure salvation for a specific people.
It leaves no room for human boasting or cooperation in the work of atonement. Christ accomplished it entirely on his own.
So what does this all mean for your personal daily reality?
Let's bring it back to the ground level.
When you face false accusations, when you deal with slander at work, or when you feel the hostility of a culture that rejects your faith, the natural instinct is revenge.
Or at the very least, severe anxiety.
You want to vindicate yourself. You want to prove you are right and they are wrong.
That is the default human setting. But referencing the third use of the law, which is found in Westminster Confession chapter 19, we see how the law guides the believer in grateful obedience.
For those unfamiliar, the third use of the law is the way God's moral law instructs born-again believers on how to live in a way that pleases him.
Not to earn salvation, but out of gratitude for it.
Precisely. And here, the instruction is to mortify our pride. Believers can endure injustice, slander, and false accusations in this life without falling into despair because their ultimate justification is already eternally secure in Christ's finished work.
You do not have to win every argument here on earth.
No, you don't.
You do not have to frantically defend your reputation against every critic because the highest court in the universe has already declared you righteous based on what the silent king did.
When your own conscience accuses you of your failures, or when Satan accuses you of your sins, you do not have to rely on your own personal eloquence to defend yourself.
You do not try to list your good deeds to balance the scales.
You rely entirely on the blood and the perfect righteousness of the silent substitute. He stood silent so that his blood could speak on your behalf.
That is such a powerful anchor for the soul. If your reputation is ruined falsely, you can rest knowing the king understands that exact pain, and he has secured a verdict of not guilty for you where it actually matters.
The verdict is already in.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's briefly recap the monumental shifts we have discussed today. We started with the intense political tension of first-century Jerusalem, detailing Pilate's violent history and the hypocrisy of the religious leaders using Roman treason laws to execute their Messiah.
We looked at the substitutionary silence of Jesus, explaining how his passive obedience meant he actively kept his mouth closed to bear the guilt of his people,
Providing a stark contrast to the first Adam's defensive pride in the garden.
We saw the absolute terror and amazement of Pilate, who witnessed a bound prisoner exercising more authority than the entire Roman Empire.
And we warned against the danger of admiring Jesus without submitting to him.
And we traced how this single courtroom scene fulfills the comprehensive Old Testament expectation of the king, the servant, the priest, the sacrifice, and the prophet.
It is the hinge of all redemptive history.
I want to leave you with one final, chilling yet glorious thought to mull over as we end.
This is something you really need to ponder.
We started today by talking about the frantic noise of a courtroom and the shocking, unnatural silence of Jesus standing before Pontius Pilate. But that scene is not the end of the story.
Not by a long shot.
The one who stood completely silent in humiliation before an earthly judge will one day sit upon a great white throne. And on that day, the roles will be entirely reversed.
A total cosmic reversal.
The silent king will speak the final word of judgment over all humanity, and every earthly ruler, every corrupt governor, every accuser, including Pontius Pilate himself, will stand before him, stripped of all earthly authority, in utter, terrifying silence.
The mouth of every accuser will be stopped.
The king will have the final, eternal word.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive on Reformed thinking. We invite you to rest your defense, lay down your need for self-vindication, and trust entirely in the finished work of the true King.